Hello, if you're watching this video, this is a videos and podcast special interest group call. And today I am here talking with one of the cohorts of creators. If you don't know, we have smaller groups meet regularly to discuss their creations and to support each other. And one of them asked me to talk about interviews, to give power tips about interviews, things that you might not have thought of and that can make your life easier and can make the interviews more effective. So I thought, even though this is a private conversation, today I have Peter here with me. I thought it could be, just useful knowledge because a lot of people are interested in interviews. And so, here's the recording. Okay, so just before this call, me and Peter, we were already talking about this. And Peter, you mentioned different channels to record different voices. So I might present a solution that will eliminate this problem altogether. Because the interview starts before the interview. Ideally 2 weeks before the interview, you will send a message to whoever you're going to interview with two things. First is a basic explanation on everything they need to know in terms of the narrative and how you do things, but also a tech brief. And this tech brief, I have a very strong recommendation here. Of course, if you're advanced and you've been doing this for 2 years, this might be a tip that is not as relevant to you. But if you're just getting started, send them a tech brief that says, we're going to have a Zoom call, a Teams call, some sort of interaction in one of those apps. But please record your voice in case of a video as well, like record yourself with your phone as we have the interview. And you can also do that. So the way that I do it is that there is a Zoom call that is my guide file. But because all those software, Zoom, Teams, nowadays, even actually phones, like when you call someone on a regular line, they prioritize latency rather than quality. So the voices are incredibly compressed and you lose a lot. You lose a lot of expression, you lose a lot of emotional tones because of this exchange. So uploading directly from the Zoom audio to the podcast is generally a mistake. So in this tech brief message that you're going to send 2 weeks before, you say, this is how you set up your space for a tech call. And then you can even use the video that I showed you folks with all those little tips on how to record yourself, the distance between you and the phone, and in case of video, how to have a better lighting and all of that, so that they are ready the day to have two things recording them at the same time. The phone is going to be just there, just laying there, just doing the recording, and the Zoom where they're actually going to be interacting with you. And of course, later you just get the Zoom file, put in whatever editing software you're using, and then put your voice and then put the person's voice and just aligned according to Zoom. If you record everything, each of those recordings is in a single file, this is a process that takes 2 minutes. It's very easy. And that you're talking about recording with multiple channels, that sort of creates the channels on their own. You don't have to worry about it. And the quality of the audio especially will be greatly improved. Cool. So pre-interview, an email with everything tech that the person needs to worry about, and also a little briefing of, oh, okay, this is how we do things. If you have any questions, please ask me. Okay, after that, there's the pre-interview. You cannot miss the pre-interview. Just basically half an hour before the interview, having a chat with the person. This is the non-negotiable. Even if the person is busy, you need to find a date where they can show up at least 20 minutes before the call. The really important part of this is to make them feel comfortable and safe, because being interviewed is a bit nerve-wracking. Don't know if you have much experience with that, Peter. Have you been interviewed before?
A while ago, yes, for a carers kind of piece of national piecework. So, and yes, I would agree with you. It is a bit daunting when somebody suddenly starts firing questions at you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's really important that you sort of dispel this magic before the interview starts. Just sit down with the person, use your tone of voice, talk more or less like that. Like somebody who is incredibly relaxed, so the person has something to mirror, and then they'll be relaxed as well. And also give them like the information they need. Oh, yes, this is how we run interviews. We're going to ask you a couple of questions. Generally is X amount of questions. But of course, if you say something interesting, I might interject and ask you hi, how, or why, or when around the things that you're talking about. This is more or less how the process after the recording happens. So just give the person enough information and enough of your presence so they can relax. They're like, okay, this is not such an unknown space anymore. Suddenly I understand way more what's going to happen afterwards. Um, and some people, I did that for many years. I would recommend it, honestly. They invite the other person, especially when you know that editing is going to be involved, to get the basic stuff out first and foremost. So basically, even before the questions start, before any interview proper starts, when you're already recording, you're going to tell the person, hey, do you mind introducing yourself, telling your name, telling your title, what do you do? And in this briefing that you're doing before the interview, you can even say like, hey, we're going to record like three different versions of it. I'm going to ask you to do a very brief interview or a brief intro, a slightly longer one, and then you have options. You can ask the person, oh, do you mind recording the end of the interview information at the start, just saying like how can people find you, where are your links, so you get all of this less interesting information out first, and then you
Yeah.
can have a proper conversation with the person. You don't have to do that, but I recommend. It's very useful.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
And here's something that is not exactly a recommendation, but is something I would like you to be aware of. There is a style of interview that in during this pre-interview, right before you record, or even in this email that you sent 2 weeks prior, you ask the person, is there any question or questions you would like to be asked? Um, and that is fine. That might sound boring, like, oh, I'm only going to bring questions that the person knows exactly how to answer. This might be a little robotic. This might not be very fluid. But yeah, if that was your first impression, I would invite you not to think that, because as we talk more about the what you do as you interview someone, you will see that yeah, there are many ways to make a conversation interesting, starting from uh, um when you're interviewing someone, you want them to talk about the things that they are strong at. So if they choose the question, chances are they're going to talk about the things that they are strong at. And then you can ask some extra questions and the conversation flows in an interesting direction. The last thing you want is that you ask a question that person's like, I don't know, I never heard of this. Um, but if that happens, editing exists. It's fine. um, cool. Yeah, so that was the weeks prior tech brief and also the before the call, this little conversation that you have. Any questions before we move to the interview proper?
Um, Only as a would you obviously you were saying there about asking them to kind of give you any questions. Would you give them a list of all the questions that you were thinking of asking them, or would you just give them a bit of a theme?
I've never done this.
Mhm.
But I've been done this. I've been sent the questions that people were going to ask. I don't think I think I don't know. I think this is up to you. You can even
Mhm.
ask the person, would you like to receive a list of questions that I'm thinking, or would you rather anything to make the person feel comfortable? because
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
thing. That comfort is the real focus of this interaction, especially before the interview starts. How do I make this person comfortable? And some people, like myself, for example, wouldn't like to get the questions, because I would read the questions and I would think about the questions and I would stress myself out. And other people like, no, I want to prepare. So you can even
Yeah.
address that in that message you sent to
In that
which like, if you want, if that was not going to stress you out, I can send you the questions I'm thinking about. But if you would rather, we can just have a conversation, and then the person has more propriety to choose which option works best for them.
Okay, cool.
Any more questions?
No, that's all sensible.
Cool. So interview proper. Up until then, up until that point, you haven't pressed the record button. It's crucial that you're very clear and you say like, hey, we're gonna press record now. Is that all right? So from this point on, then the game is on. And sure, you have prepared the person. You have said, oh, you can restart answering a question because we're going to have editing. You have said all those things. So you press record. And then the atmosphere changes necessarily. Even if it doesn't change a lot, it will change as the difference between a rehearsal and a premiere. It's things are happening from this point on. As I said, there's an argument to get the basics out of the way, doing introductions, doing outros, doing the basic things, so that when you actually have the interview conversation, you don't have to worry about anything else. Of course, if your idea is not to do any editing and just to record in a sequence, you can't do that. You're gonna have to do the intro first and then part of the conversation, maybe a break for the sponsor, and at the end, the outro. It's fine as well. It's just two different ways to conduct an interview that I wanted people to be aware of. Those are two good possibilities. Then with the basics out of the way, if that's your case, you start the interview proper. And you have to have prepared questions. I'm going to say, if you want to have like let's say a 40-minute long interview, you have to have at least 10 questions, but you also got to have it in your mind that you're not going to ask the 10 questions. If you ask all of your 10 questions, something went a little bit wrong, that's fine, but you want to have extra questions. And if you only explore 2 or 3 questions during the interview, that is fine. The point of the interview is not to get to absolutely everything you planned. It is to extract something useful from that conversation that you believe that it's more than just you and the person you are interviewing. More people can be interested in that thing that you captured.
Okay.
And then we come to the heart of the interview, which is the follow-ups. So the questions that you're going to ask, of course, are important, but they are generally information that people could get outside of that interview. So if somebody works in a specific area and you ask about that specific area, chances are this same person already discussed this in other channels. You can, if you search their name, you're going to find this information. But the follow-ups are unique. The follow-ups are when you ask, oh, why did you do that? Or what was the reaction when you did that? Or, oh, wow, how was the process of convincing the people that that was the right idea? So it's your curiosity leading those conversations into territories of depth. And if you think that that's the main answer, if you start to ask like why did people disagree with you? This conversation is going to go in one direction. But if you, with the same start, if your curiosity goes to a different direction and you say like hey, why did you do that in this place instead of the other place that you mentioned before? This conversation is going to go in a completely different direction. But both of those questions will lead to more depth, just depth in a particular sense, in a particular direction. You're just following in one line of curiosity. And there's infinite ways to add depth to a conversation, and no way is necessarily better than other.
Mhm.
So this is the heart of the interview, is not the main questions that you prepared. You cannot fall in love with the main questions that you prepared. If you want to ask all of them because you think they're the best questions, you're actually going to lose the depth, and you're going to get to the information that people could get outside of your interview.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the key. And this is also why interviewing someone is exhaustive, because you have to pay a lot of attention. Not only you're paying attention to the tech, like, oh, is everything working, audio, blah, blah, but you have to pay deep attention to what the person is talking about, ideally even contextualizing on what you already researched about the person you're interviewing, because you want to get to those little nuggets of depth. So if you were a note taker, this might be a super advantage, because you're like, oh yeah, I can link that to something that was said 10 minutes ago. But this also can hinder you, because you're too worried about writing, and you should be worried about like where your curiosity is leading you, how one point is leading to the other. So 80% of your work is those little follow-up questions that are not long questions, that are not paragraphs, that are just maybe, why did you do that and not the other thing you mentioned before? Those kinds of questions contextualize what's being said. And so the part of you that really interacts with the interview is your curiosity and your guidance of the conversation. Oh, I think this conversation here would be more interesting if you went to a psychological safety direction. So you lead in that direction. Oh, I think this conversation here is rather technical, so maybe it would be interesting to know how this person dealt with the bureaucracy around it. So you lead to another direction.
Yeah. And I guess then that's where the editing then comes in at the end. If you have found yourself going down a dead alley, if you like, of a line of questioning, we can just kind of, well, edit that bit out and continue with some of the more succinct elements.
Yeah, you're right. And there's there's a lot of people who record like 3 hours of interview, and the final product is a 25-minute recording. I'm not recommending you to do that. I think this is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But I understand why they do that. If their focus, the top focus above anything else, is quality, and working a lot on the product is not an issue, then generally that's a good strategy, because you with all of the material that you collected, you can really piece together the best possible story out of all those conversations that you had. Don't do it. Don't do it. If you want to record like an hour to post 40 minutes, I think that's fine. I think in this level, just get started, it's all good. But don't record 2 hours. It's too much work. um, cool. Then you have an option here. Uh, I'm not sure, it will depend on case by case, but a lot of people who run podcasts enjoy to do self-insertion. That means the person is talking about their own experience. And at first, let's say in the first 30% of the interview, you're there to listen. So you listen, you absorb, you ask your follow-up questions. But from a point on, you feel like you have enough context to put your life experience there.
Yeah.
That is fine as long as it's intentional. Most interviews don't go like that. Most interviews are exclusively about the person who you're interviewing. But if that's your style, just know that it's possible that every single episode you bring a little bit of yourself, you bring a little bit of your own experience to the table. Not sure, I'm not recommending it. I just wanted you to know that that's a possibility. Maybe this is the kind of podcast you want to host. But even in those, you got to give the person 15, 20 minutes of uninterrupted spotlight just so they can shine. They need to shine before you shine.
Yeah.
Or else the podcast is just about you. And this is, I don't know, this is you have to have an incredible personality to make a podcast that's always about yourself.
Oh, I'm all right then. That's fine.
But just know that that's a possibility. If you want to do self-insertions, just be intentional about them.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and yeah, and one last thing about the interview proper. If you haven't done that when you got the basics out of the way, at the end of the interview is common courtesy to ask for somebody's links. Like, hey, how can people find you if they want? Would you like to share something with us? And sometimes people share their own contacts. Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. But sometimes they're like, oh, would you folks, I would like to share this fundraising that I'm helping. That's fine as well. Of course,
yeah,
there are limitations there, but with the health and care crowd, I can't imagine this being particularly challenging. But it's very important to ask the person because many times they join the interview because they have something that they would like to promote. There's something that they care about that they would like to share. So it's very basic, but it's also crucial that
yeah.
if it's the first time that you're doing this, if you haven't done this in a long time, it should definitely be on a checklist.
Okay.
Cool. So quick recap. One option is to get the basics out of the way, including the end of the call at the beginning, as I said. I recommend it if you're gonna edit your call, but if you're gonna do everything in one go, that's fine. You can do step by step. Then there's the interview proper. You have to have prepared questions, and you have to not fall in love with your questions and know that sometimes just one of your questions is going to be asked. And the heart of the interview is the follow-up questions, is you using your curiosity to lead the conversation to one direction or other, to increase the depth in one direction or another. This is where most of your energy is going to be, and this is why you're going to be tired after the call. It's because of the level of attention you need to pay. Um, Self-insertions are possible depending on the format that you're going to choose. Just do them intentionally. Don't let them just pop up because something pop up in your head. Be focused on the type of interview that you want to perform. But if it's your case, you can do self-insertions. You can share your own life experience, your own work experience. Just let the person shine first. Give them 15, 20 minutes. And have it in a checklist to ask them for links or contacts or whatever they want to share. It's very important, common courtesy. Cool. That was the biggest bit of it. I still have a couple of things to share about post editing, post interview editing. But do you have any
Mhm.
questions before we move on?
I don't think so. I think yeah, it's making sense with some things that I hadn't kind of considered. That idea of recording the ends and the beginnings kind of separately from that main element makes sense. I think in my head I would always going to be editing down anyway, so it makes no difference from a work perspective on how to do that. And I think yeah, you probably get a better energy from the interviewee if you do it that way. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Grand. Okay, let me just scroll down. Okay, so let's talk about editing the material you collected. I already mentioned that what I do is I record a Zoom audio file or Teams or whatever software you use, but I don't use that for the interview. I grab those two files from the two different phones and I align them with the Zoom. When you press play and you hear one single thing without any, um, uh, as if the people were in the same room, then you can just cut what you need, and it's a very easy process. Um, then there's two main styles of editing. There's natural and sleek. Natural is how people talk, and natural we will have pauses. We'll have all sorts of little things. We'll have breathing, and that is fine. Okay, that is fine. It's fine. But there's also sleek that you edit everything out. You edit breathing out. You edit out. And that is very fast. It makes your podcast more dynamic to listen to, more like exhilarating to listen to, because it's not how people talk. It's kind of like
No.
how people talk in movies and TV, not in real life. And there's something about it that no time is wasted. So there are advantages to Sleek. For example, when somebody asks a question, there's a pause, and then somebody answers the question. In Sleek editing, the person started answering while the question is still being asked. So they sound like a genius. They sound like they needed no processing time at all. And that there are advantages to that. But if you don't have a lot of experience with editing, just know that this is hours and hours and hours of work. Hours. This is so much work. So to get things started, my recommendation is decide for natural and try just a little bit at the start to do a little bit of Sleek to see how it feels. And if that doesn't work out, if it's too much, then fine. At least you had a little experience with it, and you just use the natural, and it's fine. But eventually, especially for high-end podcasts, you want to aim for Sleek. So yeah, people just enjoy listening to two people talking, and they both sounding like geniuses. It's an illusion. It's movie magic. But
Yeah.
people just sound more intelligent when they don't have to process the information.
Yeah.
Of course, this is for podcasts that want to be edited. If you want to do that thing that if it really feels like a conversation with someone, and you're not gonna edit anything, you're just gonna use it as it is, then you go for natural. Um, a major editing tip that I share with everyone: try, try at least that. Even if you do a natural style of podcast, don't start every single episode saying, "Hey, welcome to the podcast. This is episode 52, and I'm here with interesting person X, and we're going to talk about Y." Don't start with that. Start with that when you record, and then when you're in the editing table, find the best 12 seconds of the interview when something really interesting was said, when this person brought a question that made you lead the conversation to a specific way, so interesting the question was. Get that bit and put it at the beginning. You want to hook people in. You want to do like a flash forward on this is this is a way for you to demonstrate the value that people are going to get out of that conversation. This is the value. Those 10 seconds here will make you understand why you should listen to the whole 40 minutes. I strongly recommend that.
It's noted.
uh, And the last interview, or the last editing tip I have is, if you're gonna do a little intro, like "Welcome to the blah blah podcast, your best podcast for QY in the UK, and today we're gonna talk about X." If you want to do something like that, keep it very short.
Yeah.
Uh, Try to make it less than 10 seconds if you're gonna use it every episode. If you get to 15 seconds, that's all right. But just try to be as quickly as you can. Remember that this is important for you, but this is not particularly enticing or relevant to anybody else. Um, maybe once when people are just finding out about your podcast, this can deliver value to them. But if they become a fan, they will listen to that 50 times, and the 49 of them will deliver no value at all. So at
Yeah.
least try to keep it short.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Um, that's what I had for editing. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to bolt soon. But do you have any questions, Peter?
I don't think so. It makes a lot of sense. I think what I now need to do is actually record some longer segments, and a bit more practice with the editing, just to yeah, try those styles out, as you say, between that more kind of natural side and then that sort of sleeker cutting cutting things down a bit more harsh. So yeah, no, it's really exciting stuff. It's been really interesting, the stuff you've talked about today. Thank you very much.
You got it. I'm gonna send you and everyone from the cohort. Even more. I'm gonna send for everyone in the cohort, but I'm also gonna put in the SIG a list of the topics that I talked about here, just as a reminder, just so you don't have to watch the whole video if you wanna refresh your memory. But yeah, I'm very curious to see your interviews, especially with this nice microphone you showed me before. Love the recording here.